Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here. He's going to join me in just a second. Some news around the Phillies. Kyle Schwarber has been scratched from the lineup tonight. He was in the original lineup hitting leadoff. He is now scratched from the lineup. Weston Wilson will move to third base, and Bryson Stott is now hitting leadoff for the Phillies. So not good news to hear that Schwarber is out of the lineup after he originally was in the lineup. So that's a quick breaking news here on the Sports Bash. We got other news today. Vic Fangio spoke to the media. We want to get Geoff Mosher's take on some of the stuff that Fangio had to say as the Eagles get ready for the Atlanta Falcons. He joins us now for another edition of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. What's up, Moshe?
What's up, Mike? It sounds like you and I are going to be talking about people not in a lineup today as opposed to people who are in a lineup, which is never good.
Well, that seems to be the theme around both sides, the Eagles and now the Phillies with Schwarber out. But today, Vic Fangio asked pretty convincingly, he made the answer, Nakobe Dean's the starter. He confirmed that Dean will be the starter, and what does that mean for Devin White? He said, Dean won the job. So a lot of questions about that ankle injury and what was going to happen after that. Well, it seems that that's all been cleared up now. So Dean's the starter. What's it mean for White?
I mean, I certainly thought it was trajecting that way anyway. Is that word, trajecting? Yeah, the trajectory was going that way. I know you talked to Andrew a lot. He was at every training camp practice. He felt that Nakobe Dean was the best performer among all the linebackers. Zach Bond got as many first-team reps as Zach Bond could get for a guy who had never played the position. And Devin White was getting first-team reps, but you saw they were kind of like, hey, he wasn't going to play in the preseason much. And it was going to be hard with Dean being a homegrown drafted player to just not play after doing what was asked of him in camp. And that's why Vic Fangio said it, and we had been saying on the podcast, and Andrew had been writing it, that Dean was going to play. And he played, and despite some issues in run defense that are all around, I will say, Nakobe Dean did some nice things against the run. He had some nice run fits, he had 2 consecutive run stops there after the turnover in the red zone early in the game. So he's going to be the starter. Zach Bond, if he continues to play that way, will be the starter for sure. Now, Vic said that Devin White was still a part of it, and that's very nebulous. A part of what? You're talking about a guy who hasn't played a whole lot of special teams in the last 2 or 3 years. And I don't know that they want him on special teams. I don't know if he wants to be on special teams now. But, Mike, I mean, they signed him to a deal where he's going to make $5 million guaranteed, and that's a lot of money to pay a guy to be a backup linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, he says, what's his role? Oh, he still kind of has a role in this team, but, you're generally not going to rotate the linebackers, or is that a possibility as well?
I mean, I suppose you can rotate. I just don't know why you would at this point if you're getting what you want out of Bond and Dean in the nickel. And when in the few snaps of dime they played, it was Zach Bond who was there, not even Nakobe Dean. So I don't see there's always the 3 linebacker package of when a team comes out in 2 tight ends or 2 running backs. I mean, that's what are we talking about? 10% of a game, if that. I mean, there were times that the Packers came out in 12 personnel with Musgrave and Kraft on the field, and Vic still responded with a nickel package, not even a base of 3 linebackers. So I can't really tell you how many snaps that Devin White is going to play or what kind of role he can actively have for this team. I can tell you he's going to make some pretty decent amount of money doing nothing.
Yeah, well, you wonder, I guess he's just here now as a $5 million backup and as a depth piece because, it seems pretty clear and obvious today that Vic Fangio said, nope, Nakobe won the job in Nakobe's a starter. I think from the start of camp that he won the job. Is it weird to you, though, that Dean didn't seemingly get as many first-team reps?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. A lot of training camp is not performance-based, right? It's fact-finding, figuring out who fits where the best. You just go back to last year. I mean, Terrell Edmonds was your first-team safety for 90% of training camp, and then things changed maybe in the last few days where you started to see Justin Evans get those reps. So you just try not to make too much. I say this all the time. You just don't make a whole lot of what you see in training camp, especially when it comes to personnel groupings and starters and backups and things like that. I think the bigger question, Mike, and this is something we talked about when the Eagles first signed Devin White and gave him that $5 million guaranteed. I never understood it because the scouting report that I got, and Adam Kaplan, same thing, talking to other people, was that he sort of isn't someone that you would see flourishing in a Vic Fangio defense outside of being a good blitzer. And Vic does like to blitz linebackers, sim pressures and things like that. But as far as discipline, as far as run fits, as far as, not freelance, I mean, these were knocks against him for 2 years running in Tampa Bay. I really don't get why they felt like they had to sign him for that much and who they were competing against when he was coming off a substandard year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you take a look at that and kind of scratch your head. I don't know. Are we ready to scratch our head against Bryce Huff, or is that getting a little far ahead of ourselves? Fangio didn't not a glowing, discussion today about Huff and his role. And, basically this is the second time he's been asked about Huff and didn't really have a whole heck of a lot of positive to say.
Mike, us men of a certain age, right? We can listen to a Vic Fangio press conference and close our eyes and almost think it's like 20 years ago. I can't believe it's probably been about that long. And it sounds like a Jim Johnson press conference, doesn't it? Just honesty, short statements, but really telling it like it is. And he basically said, when someone asked him, what's it going to take to get more snaps or more field time for Bryce Huff, he said, well, he's got to separate himself from the rest. And that's really, a fascinating comment because really, especially because nobody's going to tell Vic Fangio what to do, right? I mean, this is Vic Fangio, not an acolyte, not a first or second year defensive play caller. And Howie Roseman went out and spent a lot of money on Bryce Huff. And Howie Roseman's used to having a lot of power with this organization and even having a little say in who's going to be on the field. Okay. So I'm not like trying to warm you up for a potential headbutting. It's just 1 week. Clear, maybe conditioning, maybe message sending is a part of this, but 5 or 6, 7 weeks from now, if we're not seeing Bryce Huff on the field more and getting some sacks, then it's going to be really interesting to see how that's going on inside the building.
Well, you got Graham had 32 snaps, Huff 30, Nolan Smith 31. So he didn't have, he was right there with everybody else, but he still had the lowest. If you're playing behind Brandon Graham, I guess the question is, can a team really depend on a 36-year-old Brandon Graham? I don't want to see be their main guy, but 32 snaps, he played the most. I mean, what's your read there?
My read is Vic felt more. Well, first of all, Brandon did play inside a decent amount at defensive tackle, especially in the pass rush, so that you get extra snaps. Obviously, you're not seeing Bryce Huff move inside or Nolan Smith or anything like that. But I think Vic made it clear this wasn't also not we're sending Brandon Graham out on a high note. We feel he's one of our best producers, and that shouldn't surprise anybody. It's September. Brandon Graham has always kept himself in great shape, and he has always been a very good two-way edge rusher, defensive end, whatever you want to call him. I just wonder, if you're going to do this week in and week out, what kind of Brandon Graham are you expecting in late October, November, December, January, February, if you're lucky enough to be there, if you're going to play him the most snaps of any edge guy?
Geoff, give me your thoughts on, he was asked about Isaiah Rodgers today and what that configuration in the secondary may look like. We want our best guys out there, he said. Rodgers back, that's moved Mitchell back in. You got Avonte Maddox. What kind of role does Rodgers have upon return?
I imagine that the role he'll have when he returns is he's going to be the outside corner when you know what? I'm wrestling back and forth. I really am. I think Vic has been pretty clear that he likes Quinyon Mitchell outside. Likes him as an outside corner. That's where, and he played well as an outside corner. Greg Cosell in particular was really impressed. They'll talk more about that on a show with us that'll drop tomorrow with how Quinyon played, especially for a rookie. So And you can't say that Avonte Maddox played all that well. So is Vic really going to go in and continue to play Avonte Maddox here in the slot, especially with guys like Kyle Pitts that you have to worry about now with Atlanta, and keep Mitchell outside and just use Isaiah Rodgers as a backup and maybe a kick returner? And we'll have to see with the hand. I mean, if it's even good enough to do that. But if he plays, I don't know. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to see. He obviously used him inside of all training camps. So you would think Rodgers ready to play. When they're in nickel, you play Rodgers outside and you move Quinyon Mitchell to nickel. I guess right now, wouldn't shock me if they tried to split the time a little bit more in nickel between Avonte Maddox and Cooper DeJean. DeJean got a couple of snaps in there as a dime backer, and maybe with another week of practice, you get a little bit more conditioning. Maybe you try to get him a little bit more time in that nickel back role. You split it with Avonte and keep Quinyon Mitchell outside. I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if you saw a couple of different packages, Mike.
Well, a question we got asked yesterday, and I think we kind of talked about this back in training camp, but Rodgers, not a slot guy, right?
No, he was never a slot guy. He was a nickel corner who played nickel outside, or as Vic Fangio would say, he just played corner. And then the other kid that they have that they would move, who's pretty good, who's Kenny Moore, is it?
Yep.
They would move him inside to play the nickel back position. But that was their nickel package where Isaiah Rodgers would play in, meaning he'd be on the bench if they were in a base, and he would come in for nickel, but he would play outside, and he didn't rep inside, to my knowledge, at all with the Eagles at camp.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people just assumed that when he got here, he's going to be taking over the slot. Never really got any snaps there. He's the outside guy. Mitchell's there. But like today, Vic Fangio, you talk about a guy, old, crusty, doesn't have a lot of things to say. He seemingly loves Quinyon Mitchell in the game that he played the other night.
Yeah. I mean, what's not to like? Physical, tall, fast, closes cushion well. Did he give up some passes? Sure. Does every cornerback give up some underneath yards? Yeah. But, you had to be pretty impressed with the overall package that you saw, and the physicality especially. And he wasn't afraid to get in there in some runs and stick his nose in and make a tackle.
Talking with Geoff Mosher. Let's get a couple thoughts. This will be the last time. Actually, you'll be back Monday, but I want to get a couple early thoughts on Atlanta from you. Kirk Cousins and that offense, when they bring him in there, this is a team last year that just did not have good quarterback play, Jeff, and they bring in Cousins. It didn't go so well for the first week, but they do have some interesting weapons, and you wonder, if he just, got to knock the rust off. He came off an Achilles injury, or do you think Kirk Cousins is kind of shot?
No, I don't think it was shot. I mean, I watched the game, and to me, it just looked more like offensive confusion. I thought the team run blocked well, but there were some, just like the Eagles, they had some snap issues. Remember, they're running an entirely new style of offense. Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator, comes from that Shanahan-McVay tree, really McVay. He was, I believe, with the Rams. He comes over, so he's going to be in the shotgun a lot. It's going to be zone stretch runs. And Kirk Cousins in Minnesota was not a predominantly shotgun style quarterback. He was there, but he was under center quite a bit as well. And I think he likes that. I think he likes to work off play action that way, run the ball downhill, under center, set up some good play action. He's always been that kind of a quarterback. So now you're adjusting to an offense that really doesn't have that, and maybe it will this week. Sometimes offensive coordinators realize they got to adjust to their personnel, not just vice versa. But I can't say shot. I don't think so.
Yeah, you just they got Bijan, dangerous guy, Pitts, dangerous guy, London, dangerous guy. They spent some money at the wide receiver. So we'll see what that offense looks like. And then it feels like they beefed up their defense late. Justin Simmons, Matt Judon, Grady Jarrett's always been a problem. So the initial thoughts about the matchup with this defense.
Yeah, no, I mean, this will be I thought the Packers have a pretty good defense, but it was so tough with everybody slipping all over the field. But the addition of Matthew Judon gave the Falcons what they really didn't have last few years, which is a really good edge rusher. And then Grady Jarrett, who's always been one of my favorite defensive tackles, kind of an underrated guy, coming off that knee injury that he had. So now he's healthy. And then you got Judon. I think they drafted Jared Verse, right? So they've got some guys now up front that they're pretty confident in. I don't know how great they are at corner, but yeah, safety, linebacker, pretty decent. I think this will be Raheem Morris is known as being a very good defensive mind. So they'll come in here and they'll be prepared for some things that the Eagles, they'll see what they did on tape. And listen, Raheem Morris, having coached with Kyle Shanahan and McVay, I mean, he knows all about the motion and the misdirection, so he'll be ready for that.
Talk with Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. Make sure you check that out on the latest Q&A with Jason Avant and Quentin Michael over on the Inside the Birds platform, which you guys really should check out. What did those guys, notice about Kellen Moore and what motion brought to this offense that made, them, I don't want to say virtually unstoppable, but made them more entertaining and less clunky?
Well, answers and layups. When we say layups, there's no easy throws in the NFL, but there are throws to receivers who are open because you schemed them open. That was an issue last year in the last 8 games. But I know everyone wants to highlight the Barkley wheel route, and that's a good example. A couple other examples where motion, shifting, post-snap kind of maneuvering led to guys being open and made it easier, gave a clearer picture to Jalen Hurts to be able to throw to.
Yeah. Well, guess what? For one night on a slippery field to put up 34, it looked a lot more fun than what we watched over the last 7 weeks of last year. It was painful at times, and we'll see what Kellen Moore dials up in game number 2. Saquon Barkley, by the way, is the NFC Player of the Week. Now, if you were to pick one guy to be the Player of the Week, Barkley or Bond, who would you have given it to?
Well, you could have given offensive to one and defense to the other. I mean, Bond had 15 tackles.
15 tackles and 2 sacks.
Yeah, the other thing is you're not going to get Defensive Player of the Week when your defense gives up 29 points, I think. So I get it. Sometimes you can make 50. I'm not taking anything away from Bond, but you can make a few tackles in 15 tackles that are 5 to 10 yards down the field. Whereas, when you're running back, you get 3 touchdowns. You probably earned it, and certainly Saquon Barkley earned it.
All right, Moshe. Of course, he'll be back on Monday to get us ready for the Eagles and the Falcons. We'll break down that matchup a little deeper. We'll get his pick for the game as you can listen to the Eagles and the Falcons right here, Monday Night Football on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds podcast, everyone. Thanks, Moshe.
You got it, Mike. Take care.
All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Of course, the Sports Bash is live on 97.3 ESPN, the 97.3 ESPN free mobile app.